Hi everyone and welcome back to the studio. I wanted to share a fun little class for you that has been highly recommended or requested, I guess, by my students at Luminous Elephant. I started teaching this year in person in this very cute little studio. I will actually link it in the comment or in the description so you can find it. If you're in Vancouver, you can come take classes with me. One of my biggest questions from beginners on painting is how to choose colors and also how to mix the colors. And in my personal opinion, I think that this is one of the most important skills that you can develop as an artist. And if you develop it early on, even better. So on Etsy, I'm going to start selling, and you know what, I'll make this available on Patreon too, but I'm going to start selling these cute little dot cards with my favorite color choices. This is what I would consider my most minimal palette that I would like to use. So we have let me see, we've got a very warm orange red, and we have a very pink red. So these would be my primary reds, and you can see that they're very split in terms of color, this one being much more yellow and this one being much more blue. I like to have a nice golden or warm yellow on my palette. This is yellow ochre, and it tilts toward golden or red tones. I also like to have a very bright yellow that is not too green and definitely not at all orange. I then like something that is similar to a cobalt teal. This one is actually turquoise blue light. I really like this for seascapes, and it's a nice, very green blue for horizon, not skies and things. This is so dark you can't see it, but it is Ultramarine Blue red shade, my go-to red blue. However, if you can't find it, a red phthalo blue would also do. It is just not quite as purpley as the ultramarine, and it is way more staining, so that's just something to watch out for. This is an Ivory Black. I like to have it to create some shadows and depth and sort of knock down saturations. And then this is an burnt umber on here. So if you get my classes on Etsy, I will be doing cute little watercolor tutorials. You will also in the mail receive all the paints that you need for these. Today what we're going to do is just the color mixing. I want to just go through my logic on mixing color, and we're going to fill out this little chart basically. So essentially I've got all the color names across the top and the bottom. You will also receive one of these in the mail if you grab my course. So we're going to paint little fairies. Actually, really quickly, I don't know if you can see it here, but you will receive also printouts on watercolor paper of the line drawing of my works so that you can absolutely follow along with all of the same materials. We'll do the color mixing thing. Anyways, so I hope it'll be really clear for you, and I hope you'll really enjoy it. My aim is to basically condense what took me years to learn into very fast little bites for you that are super actionable so that you can sort of improve faster than I did. That's my goal, is to get you to where I am now way faster than it took me to get there. So hopefully you'll find this useful and enjoy the class. We will dive right in. Okay, so for this exercise, it's really just so that we understand how mixing color works so that we can use it to our advantage. And I really believe that having good quality paint and less colors is better for you long term than just buying all of the colors. It's nice to have extras, but we don't really need them. We're going to sort of maximize what we can do with what we have. So I've got my primaries set out here. Normally you can have just 3 primaries. So you could do like more of an RGB, so red, yellow, blue, actually, it would be more like. So I would then take this cadmium, this yellow, and this blue, which is the more purple blue. Or you could do more of a CMYK version, which is more this red, this yellow, and this blue. However, I like to have the range, and I will show you why as we make our color chart. And this color chart is going to be really helpful for you when you're painting as a reference, because you will see how all of the colors interact with each other. And you'll notice, like I have, for example, cadmium red, and then opera rose and opera rose. So in the sections where the names line up, that is where you put the solid color. But here we've got cadmium red and opera rose, and the same thing here. So what I like to do in that case is actually just let the color tint more one way or the other. So there's actually a lot of variety that you can get just by mixing two colors together. So, and one thing to keep in mind is that you really want to keep this dot chart very clean. So make sure to wash your brush, or yeah, wash your brush every time. I'm using a flat for this just because it's easy to make nice little swatches, and it's just one of the cheap Noble brushes. These are my go-to. I love them. So I'm just going to take a little bit of my Cadmium Red and Cadmium Red and put it where those sort of spaces intersect there. So that is my pure Cadmium Red Deep color. This will also, especially on these dark colors, it'll open them so you can actually see what they look like. I am going to clean my brush. I should have gotten myself a paper towel, but I did not. I will go get one. So I'm just going to clean my brush here, and I'm just going to get my primaries out of the way. You'll see they kind of flow on a diagonal. So now I've got my Opera Rose in my Opera Rose section. Get a little bit more. This is a very hot pink, but you can temper this later, and I will show you how as we mix these colors. One thing that I will say, I like to pick colors that are sort of at the top of their saturation and brightness. I don't like to take colors as my mixing colors that already have some dullness to them, whether it be like a grayness or just a deepness that's too dark. The reason being is that you can always tone down a color, but you cannot add saturation. So if you're picking colors that are at the top of their saturation already as your main colors, then you're not going to struggle to make bright paintings, and it will be easier to avoid making muddy colors. And I think that like getting used to a single palette and working with that quite a bit will help you in your understanding of how color interacts. So like there's a lot of choices on the market of color. I picked these ones because I know that they will work well together in the ways that I want to work with them. But for example, in my oils and acrylics, instead of this turquoise, I take a manganese blue as my green blue. I will say it is a little bit more bluish than green. So if I really need to do a coastal scene, I'll probably add a cobalt teal, but I find that the manganese is green enough as a blue to give me the contrast that I need. You could take any other yellows, like a lemon yellow or a Hansa yellow light color instead of the cadmium. They may even be more transparent than the cadmium. Cadmium isn't all that transparent. So there's a few things to consider, but you don't need to get too worried about that for now. I think just getting a palette that sort of captures this range is great for beginning. I'm giving you guys a fairly generous amount of paint on these dot sheets here. I want to make sure that you are able to do both this exercise and the paintings that we're going to create together with this. This is a project I've been wanting to do for a little while. I kind of went offline for a long time. I know this is not really relevant if you guys are just coming across this right now and you haven't seen me before, but I was posting a lot on YouTube, and then I took a break because I started teaching a lot in person at Luminous Elephant Studio. She treats me really well. Her name's Madeline, the owner. She's amazing, and I'm paid very well for my hours and my expertise. So I had to sort of put 100% of my focus in that for a while as I planned my courses and just got ready. And, you know, of course, you always have those sort of nerves of starting new things and the imposter syndrome of if I'm going to be good enough and all that kind of fun stuff. So I just kind of took a break for a while. All right. So that is basically our primary range. Now, one thing that I like with watercolor is to allow the paints to mix themselves with the water on the paper. So you'll see behind this palette right now, I do have a big plastic palette from Fryett. I like this in my studio when I'm doing large portraits and things because I have a lot of space to mix on, basically. And it's a plastic, so I can absolutely re-wet these colors and use them very easily. But when I actually do paintings, I kind of like to allow the colors to mix themselves because then you get a lot of variation. So for example, let's say on this one, because the name here let me see, Opera Rose and Cadmium Red. So let's, I guess, prioritize right now the Opera Rose color. So what I mean by that is I'm going to take some Opera Rose, and it's nice and wet here. And this is another thing, you'll start seeing that some colors are a lot more powerful than others. So you'll sort of, I always try to mix the more intense or more staining color into the less staining one. And see, this is already, the red here is already way more staining. So I'm going to actually lift some of that up. I might even put a bit in here because that's going to be the more red one. But this one, I want to keep it more pink. And I don't want it to be straight up Opera Rose, so I still want to take a little bit of this. So now you can see, just by mixing these two colors, I'm getting a red that's almost between the two. Add a little bit more pink in here. There we go. A little bit more pink in there. All right, and the other one, I'm going to go, I'll take some Opera Pink because it's the lighter color, and we're going to allow more of the red to get in there. See how that overpowers quite quickly? So I'm going to take a little bit more of this Opera Pink. There we go. So now you can see, even though I've just used the same two colors, I almost have 4 different shades here. This one tilting a little bit more orange, this one tilting a little bit more to the pink, and as we see the pigment settling, we'll see how they granulate. Some granulate more than others, and you can get really interesting variations that way. All right, let's move on to the next series. So I've got yellow ochre here and cadmium red. So yellow ochre, I will prioritize the yellow ochre on this one and the cadmium red up here. So I will take my yellow ochre, I'll put a little bit up here too while I'm at it because my brush is already dirty. And here I want more yellow ochre, so I'm just going to take a touch. That was too little of a touch. Take a touch of that red and let this have a little bit more of those yellows coming through. So I've created a bit of an orange color there. And this one, cadmium red, and more of my yellow ochre in there. So you can see the kind of orange that you can make with these colors, this one being a little bit more to the orange and this one being a little bit more to the yellow. So even though they're the same colors, we are getting a range there. Notice how some of these colors start looking really great for flesh tone. So I'm also kind of imagining how I will use these colors as I paint, and so those are great little flesh tones. Let's go maybe to the cadmium yellow light and the cadmium red deep. Again, let's prioritize the yellow on this one. So I'm going to take more yellow. The cadmiums are quite strong in staining, so mixing 2 cadmiums together will give you very similar staining results. So I don't need to worry about this overpowering as much. And I do like the cadmium yellows because they do hold their weights very well. I find sometimes Hansa yellows and lemon yellows aren't all that powerful compared to some of my other pigments. So that is a little bit red for what I wanted. So I'm gonna take a little bit more of this yellow in here just to bring it more towards an orange. And then this one, get brown all over. So this one is gonna have more of the red in it, but also some of that yellow. So I just wanna make sure that I'm getting a bit of a range between these two. One tilting more yellow and one tilting more red. And that's pretty balanced right now. So I say we can go a little bit more yellow in this one, I think, to get that slightly different orange there. There we go. And let's go on to turquoise blue light and cadmium red. So this will give you a type of purple. And again, let's prioritize the blue down here Again, this one looks quite staining, and I can tell just by the way it goes on the paper that is a less transparent pigment. That is quite a bit of red. The red was still quite powerful, so I'm going to let that go up there, and I'm going to grab a little bit more of my turquoise here. There we go. So that's going to be a more blue version of that purple, and then this is going to be the more reddy version of that purple. Now, because this is complementary theory here, because this red has more orange in it and this one has more green or yellow in it, their red and green are complementary, so you're going to get a more dull purple. I'm going to take now the ultramarine red shade, and again I'm going to stay more blue on this side and then more red on the top. I should tape this down. It's moving on me. So more blue. So unfortunately my ink for these is not waterproof. Oh, there we go. That's more reddy brown. Okay, this one I'm going to take more blue in there because I want it to be, that cadmium is really punchy. And I want this to be my more blue version. And see how different that is from the one above? We're still getting purples, but very different purples. And this one I want it to be more toward the red shade. And again, this is a fairly orange red, and orange and blue are complementaries. So we are going to get a purple that is somewhat muted. But you can see they're both different than the ones next to them. Okay, so my students really love this fun little exercise. And then you have this great little cheat sheet that you've made. All right, Ivory Black. Ivory Black is a fun one. It's a fairly warm black. And I like it to desaturate colors and to create shadows and things. But I use it quite sparingly, to be honest. So on this one, I will prioritize the black. Oops, this is going to change everything. You got to watch out to not go between the lines there. So I've just introduced some purple in there, but that's all right. Do a little bit. I will do Ivory Black here, but a bit more red in there. So I'm going to take the red and bring it up here, so you can kind of see what this does. And then here we want more of the black showing through, so you can see that difference. So both of them are red and black mixed. One has more red and the other has more black. And then let's do some burnt umber. Let's do more brown down here. So we already kind of had some red in our brush, so I'm just going to go with that. And then this one up here, and I will let a little bit more red come through with that brown. So you can see how it's now deviated from the original color, but we're still getting a nice red there. Okay, next step. At this point, you may need to change your water. This is quite stained. I'm going to go do that now. All right, so we are on to yellow ochre and ochre red, or opera pink. So I'm going to take my yellow ochre. Again, let's do, or opera rose, sorry, yellow ochre, opera rose here. And let's do more yellow ochre. And then also there's yellow ochre and opera rose here. So I'm just going to drop this in here. I'll let this one have more yellow to it. Or sorry, this one will have more rose. Let's do more yellow on this one. All right, so It's going to have more yellow. So let's start with the side that has more rose. And then this has more yellow. What I'm doing there is a little bit bad. It's risking contaminating my main colors. So you see you can get two different variations of a similar color. So let's go down to the cadmium yellow light and ochre rose, and then so ochre rose and cadmium yellow light. So let's do more yellow down here. And then more of the red up here. And like I said, that yellow, because it's cadmium, is quite powerful. The cadmiums and the phthalo colors are very staining and powerful colors. So here we have a mix that prioritizes the pink, and then here we have a mix that prioritizes the yellow using the same colors. And then you can compare those to the main cadmium yellow color so we can see how red they're shifted. Now let's go to turquoise blue light and ochre rose. So ochre rose and turquoise blue light. So again, let's prioritize the blue down here. And we will prioritize the pink up here. Make sure there's enough pigment down though. And now I'm going to take my rose. So more pink up here to create those purples. And then more blue on this one. Those ones just play so nicely together. You can definitely see that range. All right, that's crazy that those are the same pigments and we're getting very different colors. And you'll start seeing, you maybe can't see it in the camera, but as these dry, because certain pigments granulate differently, this one, especially these two, the turquoise and the cadmium, it's sort of creating like a staining. It's like they're not mixing 100%, but you're getting this sort of optical illusion of this different color, and you're getting a lot of variation in there. So I'm going to do the ultramarine color with my ochre rose. So let's prioritize the blue down here. So I'll put a little bit more down, and let's prioritize my red shade up here. So I'm going for a more reddy purple. And then here I'm going for the more blue purple. It may take a little bit more. It's just not quite changed as much as I wanted it to from the original. A little bit more purple. There we go. And that makes just a fabulous purple color. Now, Ivory Black and Ochre Rose. Let's see what this does. We'll prioritize the black down here. And we will prioritize Ochre Rose and Ivory Black, the red, up here. See how nice and warm that is? I really like Ivory Black. It's a beautiful color. And it plays well with other colors. So more red up here. See how that's nice and desaturated? That's a stunning color. And then more black down here, but we do want hints of those reds. Okay. This is the exact same color theory that I use in my oil and acrylic painting. People really like the way I deal with color. It's one of the major comments that I get from people looking at my paintings, and this is the theory that I've put behind that. It's just the only difference is that I'm using slightly different colors, but the impact on the palette is very similar, and the way that I'm sort of conceptualizing color is the same. So this one is Burnt Umber and Ochre Rose. So we've got our nice brown tone here, and I'm going to allow more brown coming through down here. And then Ochre Rose and Burnt Umber over here. So let's take this, and I will let more pinks come through on this one. So there's one with the two colors mixed, yet more pink showing through. And here's one with the two colors mixed, but more brown showing through. I may need to add a little bit more. Hard to say. It might be all right. It is different than this color, so that's what I'm going for. And it's very much different than my original, so I think I'll leave it at that. Okay, cadmium yellow light and yellow ochre. This is where we're going to make a mid-tone yellow based on the two colors that we have and cadmium yellow. So I'll do more of the cadmium yellow here on the yellow ochre one, and then yellow ochre here and cadmium yellow. I'll put more of the yellow ochre on this top swatch. Let it go a little bit more golden. So yellow ochre with that yellow. And then I'll take what's left over and mix it down here to allow more yellow to come through. And then turquoise blue light and yellow ochre is going to give us a green that I really love for fresh foliage. And we're going to let this one be a little bit more of the turquoise. And we're going to let this one be a little bit more of the yellow. Actually, this will give us a slightly warmer version than what I was thinking of. I really like this color with the cadmium, but this will still give us a really nice, bright foliage color. A little bit more golden. And I will add more yellow to this one. So now we're getting into the yellow green, or the gold green territory. Nice warm gold greens. And by the same logic, we will take the ultramarine shade with our yellow ochre. So I'm going to let more blue be in this one. And I'm going to let more yellow come through up here. I'll take my yellow ochre because we want more yellow on this one. I'm going to start up here. And then I'm going to let more blue happen on this one and get a deeper, darker green. Okay, next chart, Ivory Black and yellow ochre. So let's do the same thing. We'll let more Ivory Black happen on this side. And then we'll look at the yellow ochre Ivory Black, and I'll let more yellow come through on this one. We'll start up here with the yellow. notes of those black coming through, and then here we have more black with notes of the yellow. And then burnt umber and our yellow ochre. More burnt umber on the bottom here. Yellow ochre and burnt umber over here. And then I'm going to grab our yellow ochre color. And I'm going to start up here because we want more of the yellow. And then want a little bit more. I know it's not going to carry as well, so that's a little bit thick. There we go. A little bit more of that brown showing. And you know what? I think we can actually push these yellows a little bit further. There we go. Okay, now this is the fun part. Turquoise light blue and my cadmium yellow. This is like fresh foliage. So I'm going to take this one and let more blue come through here. And then here's my cadmium yellow light and my turquoise up here. So I will let more yellow come through in that spot. Oops. More yellow. So we're getting this incredibly nice, bright yellow green color. And then here we can knock it down a bit into a slightly darker, more blue version. And then the ultramarine blue shade, or red shade, I mean. Ultramarine red shade here. And I'm going to do more ultramarine on this swatch. And then cadmium yellow light up here with the ultramarine blue shade. I'm going to let more yellow come through on this one. And you'll see the different types of greens that we can get with. So we have a couple greens there. And then ivory black and yellow. This also makes an incredible green color. So I'm going to let more ivory black come through down here. And my cadmium yellow and my ivory black, I'll let more yellow happen up in here. These make really sort of natural earthy green colors. That's too much yellow. There we go. They're kind of muted, but they're still quite nice. So I find that these sort of get into almost like a sap green territory. Sap green is a really popular color. And then, so burnt umber and our yellow. I've seen some burnt umbers that are actually a little bit more yellow than this to begin with. And then I want my yellow and my burnt umber, so I'll let more yellow come through here. And then more brown come through on the bottom one. So I'll start here, add my yellow. And then I'll bring some of this down here to give me that different shade. I'm just going to let the pigments settle and sort of mix themselves. You get a lot of variation. All right, so next one, I've got ultramarine and the turquoise blue. So I'm going to mix more ultramarine on this one, and more turquoise on the top one. Just so you guys can see what mixing these two colors together gets you. That's a beautiful blue color. Look at that. With two blues, we just created basically 4 options at least, because this is just how we've mixed it here. If you keep mixing, you get different variations. Here we've got Ivory Black and the Turquoise Blue Light. So I'm going to put more Ivory Black down here. And then my Turquoise Blue Light and Ivory Black come up into here. So I will allow more turquoise to happen in this one. And less down in here. Let those mix by themselves. And this is also like making this chart and sort of tinting the colors 2 different ways as you make it is actually going to help you just sort of get used to balancing the amount of color that you're using. I notice a lot of students, they're a bit heavy-handed with mixing, and it's better to take sort of a very delicate approach with how you do that. So this will also help just sort of that hand-eye coordination of how much paint to grab and how to mix without sort of going overboard with your colors. It's going to be easier for you to make the colors that you want to make by taking a sort of softer, more balanced approach. And doing this exercise really helps with that. See, now, like, this is a beautiful, more neutral brown color. And if you were doing like a tree trunk or something and you need it to be a little bit more earthy, you now know that you can mix a little bit of this green into it. And it's a little bit less punchy than that. It just kind of knocks it down a little bit. Say, now we've got Ivory Black and Ultramarine. We're almost done our little chart here. Ivory Black and Ultramarine. I'll let more black come through here. And then Ultramarine and Ivory Black there. So I will let more blue happen on the top. And then more black come through here. And then we move on to Ultramarine and Ultramarine and Burnt Umber. And if you get really good paints, they typically make a black or a very nice neutral, especially with oil paints. It was the way I used to actually mix my blacks. So I'm going to let more Burnt Umber come through here and then more blue come through up there. See, that just darkens right up. This is how you can get some nice neutrals. So again, we've got a really nice sort of more natural, earthy brown color for tree trunks and whatnot. And then Burnt Umber and Ivory Black are our last 2. So I will let more Burnt Umber come through here. And then more Ivory Black come through up there. So more Ivory Black up here. There may have been a little bit of blue in there, but that's all right. And then more of the brown down here. You can see the difference between mixing the black in there versus mixing the blue in there. I need a little bit more black. There we go. All right, so that gives us a full range color chart. So with this palette, you can make all of these colors. So now if you're wanting to create some foliage that goes from a really sort of bright green in the highlights, you can sort of go between these different colors. And then if you want to move into the shadows where it's less saturated, you can mix sort of greens that are maybe more like this, and then you could also get some of these more like olivey greens. Maybe in some of the highlights to create some variation, you can create some of these colors. In our skies, we can go sort of from this color through these colors, so the color can move this way. So from a greeny blue through to a more purpley version of it, through to a way more purple version through to purple. So that's one way of doing it. And then, yeah, so our purples, we have quite a nice variation. We've got some that are much more up into the red tones down here, and then some tilting more toward the blue tones down there. And then we have all of our nice sort of earthy tones in here, and then our bright reds and oranges up there. I hope you enjoyed that little mini course on colors. This is sort of how I've been thinking about colors for the past few years, and that's led to quite a few breakthroughs for me in terms of my ability to mix and just sort of nail the color that I want, and also use color conceptually in my paintings to give different feelings and effects. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I can't wait to continue painting with you in the next sessions. Bye!